Hey, this is Kevin Clarkson. Thank you for joining us for Prophecy in the News this week. We are continuing a discussion we began last time with Lieutenant General retired Jerry Boykin. He is a former Delta Force member, trained Green Berets, been very active in the military, and we're grateful for his experience and service to his country. And now he's serving with Family Research Council based in Washington, D.C., and that is a group that equips pastors and churches and Christians to fight the good fight and to help stand for Christianity in these times in our land and in our culture. I want to give you a welcome, sir. Thank you for being with us.
Kevin, thank you for having me on the program.
Well, it's a delight. I've seen and heard you at many events that were more perhaps about just kind of culture and the line of work you do, the political atmosphere and things like that. So I was delighted. I knew you were a man of faith, but when I found this DVD that you've made called Revelation, The Dawn of Global Government, you're really tying the insights of what's happening in our nation today to what the Bible says is going to happen in the end time.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Chuck and Anita Untersee were the producers and editors and directors and all of this, so I'm just a part of it. But it was a privilege to be able to do this because it does point out some things that if you just look and open your eyes and look at what's happening, what you see is you see biblical prophecy that is in the making right now. And that's what we try to point out here. And ultimately, this biblical prophecy leads to a one world government. And that's what Revelation is all about there.
As part of this program today, you'll see a trailer about this. But I would just tell you, it's an hour and 45 minutes of just chock plus documentary. It never drags. I mean, it tells you what's going on.
First things I remember are frosty Carolina mornings with a cheery fire crackling in my mama's big black wood cook stove. I'm Charlie Daniels. Today, something's wrong, and we all know it.
The nation has been hijacked by international forces.
Boom! I got shot through the shoulder. My first thought was, that hurts.
Even Hollywood couldn't make up stuff like this.
The people of the world are waiting for Americans to wake up.
We, the people, have the right to keep and bear arms.
The average citizen is photographed 300 times per day.
The fence ends right here. Beheadings, beatings, torturing, burning people in barrels.
Is indicative, I think, of their confidence now that it doesn't matter if this is open. We have so much power here that they can't take us down.
The biggest stumbling block to this plan is the United States of America. Why is that? Because we have a tradition of individual freedom and liberty.
We have to protect America and the American way of life first.
World government is only the beginning.
The cock has crowed, friends. Denial will not stand.
Once they have control, they plan on absolutely dehumanizing humanity.
When I was a boy, things were pretty much like those wonderful Norman Rockwell images of 30s America.
We might just review a moment in case some of our viewers didn't catch the last program, but you referenced the creature from Jekyll Island, and that's, of course, when the bankers, wealthy industrialists, and robber barons got together. Was it 1913 off Georgia Island? And
I think it was 1912, and the legislation was passed.
Started in the 13.
Yeah, that's right. In
and
1913.
And the legislation passed on Christmas Eve when everybody was off partying and sleeping, kind of like when Obamacare was passed.
That's exactly
almost
right.
The same deal when nobody's really watching the in-house. The foxes get in. But this took away, really the Constitution says that the Congress is to do the coinage and the currency, and they just gave that away.
Absolutely usurped our Constitution with this this act that was passed, sponsored by a senator from Rhode Island, as a matter of fact. And the story behind this is these wealthy industrialists and bankers and influential men like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and so forth.
So we're not just Americans, are we? We're going back into Europe.
Oh, going back into Europe. They got on a train and went to Jekyll Island, Georgia, and isolated themselves and came up with the concept of the Federal Reserve. And the one senator that was there with them was from Rhode Island, and he came back and had the Federal Reserve Act passed on Christmas Eve. And now in this movie Revelation, we have some real experts that explain to you exactly what the Federal Reserve is and what it isn't. And there's more of what it isn't than there is of what it is, because it's not what people think it is. First of all, it's not federal, but you're right. It usurped our Constitution.
Like so many things that are brought in with the seat, something has a name that's almost the exact opposite of what it really is.
That's right. It's a deception, but it was designed from the beginning to be a deception. But you say, again, 1912, 1913. What it was all about, though, was a Marxist concept of centralizing the wealth in the world under a single entity that would be a coalition of these very wealthy, powerful people and their organizations. It's global governance.
That's been really at least a blueprint since the book of Genesis with the Tower of Babel and Nimrod. But the idea that one language, one government, one world, it sounds so good. I mean, Jesus is going to bring us that world of peace and justice and righteousness. Somebody that doesn't know Scripture well says, "What's not to like about this?" How would you answer them?
The government that Jesus will bring will be beyond our comprehension in terms of the joy and how wonderful it will be. But have you ever seen man do anything that in any way could be considered comparable to heaven, to the government that Jesus would bring? But what we can say is that if God is not in it, we labor in vain.
Amen.
And that's what is happening here. This global government movement, this Marxist movement, is laboring in vain, because ultimately it's going to be destroyed. It's going to be disrupted as we come to the time when we hear that trumpet sound.
That might bring us to some of the information in this documentary about Agenda 21. I think maybe now it's called Agenda 30, because the 21 referred to the 21st century, and it was a UN plan to get us sustainable development, and wasn't quite on target when the 2100 came. So I understand they call it Agenda 30 now, because 2030 is the target date.
Right.
It's kind of moved the date. But what are some of the components? What's really behind that, and how would the globalists really be using that?
Well, it is, in my view, it's absolutely Marxism. It is, what you're seeing is, when you remember when, neither of us was around when I was born in the year that Israel was recreated, so I could say when the Jews started coming back, they set up these things called kibbutz. They were coming out of Europe, they were coming out of Russia, out of a Marxist society, and they came in and set up microcosms of that, to where they had a communal daycare, they had a communal feeding facility, they had communal this, communal that. Well, that's what this is all about. This is about setting up a global kibbutz, if you will, where everybody is working for the government. Everybody is on the government payroll. Everything that you do is regulated by the government. And so when we talk about Agenda 21, there's a couple of books, one of which was written by Glenn Beck, of all people, about this, and it talks about how they live in these communal structures, and everybody has a role to play, and if they're not grinding away on the treadmill and creating power or energy, they're punished for it. This is what you have in North Korea today.
Yes.
You say, well, this can't really happen. Really? Read a book called Escape from Camp 14, which is about these labor camps, which is what Agenda 21 is really about. These labor camps in North Korea and a guy that escaped from it to tell the story of what's there. It's what these people are trying to create with this global governance, and it is something that, we need to be coming against this. We need to come against it in prayer.
Well, some of the big threat is to our own national identity and sovereignty.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, some of the treaties, trade treaties, and maybe even the Paris Climate Accord, if it had stood, was actually going to circumvent our own national laws. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And there's another thing that is being sponsored by the United Nations now, when it is a movement that is sponsored by the Islamic entities, and the Islamic cooperation entities, and it's about shutting down any blasphemy. Well, what is blasphemy to the Muslims? It is anything that disparages the Prophet Muhammad or Allah.
Right.
Which means that if you say anything under your idea of free speech, then you can be punished for it. And that's happening in Europe today. Look up Elizabeth Savage Wolf, who was telling her third graders in Austria that today the Prophet Muhammad would have been considered a pedophile because he married Aisha at 6 years old and consummated the marriage at 9 years old, and she was punished for it. So the Organization of Islamic Cooperation is this 57 entity. And they're not all nations, because the Palestinian authorities are represented. But they're pushing this through the United Nations. And what that's doing is usurping the American Constitution and our freedom of worship, as well as the press and speech and the right of the people to assemble peaceably to petition our government for the redress of grievances. All of that is now in jeopardy because of this thing that is being pushed by the Organization of Islamic Conference. And that's a very dangerous thing that's happening, but we see this now more and more. It's affecting Europe already.
Oh, very much.
And it will affect us in the near future if we don't stop it.
Of course, the anti-Semitism in Europe today may have the effect of sending more Jews back to the Holy Land, where maybe they'll have a chance to find out who their Messiah really is. So God even can use bad things. But do you believe that even as ISIS has been decimated, that this threat's going to go away, or is it just take a new name and morph into a new group?
I do not believe ISIS is going away. I think that under Donald Trump, our military has had great success against ISIS in Iraq and Syria, but remember, they're in 30 countries, at least 30 that we know of. And it's a 1,400-year theology that compels them to do what they do. So we should not think that they are going to be easily defeated. In fact, only God can defeat them, and we need the hand of God as we go up against this very diabolical enemy that we're facing. But they haven't gone away. They haven't been destroyed. And but we've done well against them in Iraq and Syria. But we're going to see more Islamic terrorism in the future, and we need to be prepared to recognize what compels them. That's something that has been a failure by the last 4 administrations, is understanding and acknowledging what compels them to do what they do. Donald Trump may be the first one that's actually beginning to take that on.
Do you believe we're going to see any kind of dirty bombs or attacks in our own cities if we don't turn this?
Yes, I think that first of all, the terrorist networks like Al Qaeda have been trying to get nuclear weapons for a long time. Now, here's the reality: they don't really have to have nuclear weapons,
right?
Because chemical weapons are so easy to manufacture, and they're terribly lethal. So yes, I think that they will, if they get their hands on a nuclear weapon, which could come out of North Korea or Iran, which is one of the reasons they are so dangerous, they would use it on America in a heartbeat.
I believe that.
Absolutely use it on America in a heartbeat. Now that said, I think that what Donald Trump is doing with regards to talking about withdrawing from the treaty that was made with Iran, this nuclear treaty that was made with Iran, I think he's absolutely on the right path, and I think he's dealing effectively with North Korea. North Korea will sell a nuclear material in a heartbeat to any terrorist organization that would promise to use it on America. That's why they are so dangerous, and that's why I think these are perilous times, but these are also times when we need a leader like Donald Trump. And I'll say this as a final point. From a prophetic perspective, as we watch this global terrorism and we watch what's happening, watch Turkey. Because most people don't understand that the president of Turkey, Recep Erdogan, is an Islamist. He wants to return to an Islamic Republic form of government. That means he wants Sharia or Islamic law. He is a man who is determined to be the leader of the next caliph. I was in Cairo in November, and we met with the president of Egypt, President al-Sisi, a good man. And one of the things that he said to us was that Erdogan has only one goal in life, and that is to establish a caliphate and be the head of the caliphate. That's a bold statement.
Well, it is.
That's a big statement. I think that we need to be paying close attention to Turkey, because my personal beliefs are that Turkey is very key in Ezekiel 38 and 39.
Agree.
And in most of those areas that are listed there are actually in modern-day Turkey.
Yep, I agree. Do you see any pull or influence that they have with Russia, or is it more Russia leading them when that kind of thing comes?
Well, remember, they shot down a couple of Russian airplanes. But that was just a blip on the radar. Look, Russia is working hard behind the scenes to close ranks with Turkey. And Turkey's willing to, I think, to take Russian support. And the one thing that you have to remember is Turkey's a member of NATO. If, in fact, Turkey was to align itself with Russia, openly align itself with Russia, that fractures NATO
completely.
And Turkey is the only, that's our southern flank of NATO. There are two requirements to be a member of NATO, and one is that you're a market economy. The other is that you're a representative form of government. It is only a matter of time until Erdogan is going to turn Turkey into an Islamic Republic. It will not be an elected president. He will not be an elected president. Remember that coup that occurred in the summer of 2016, well, that's not the first coup. But most coups are at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and that coup was at 8 o'clock at night when everybody was out on the street. So there's great questions as to whether it was a legitimate coup or just an opportunity for Recep Erdogan to consolidate his power, get rid of more judges, get rid of the media, shut down the freedom of the press, and then he had a referendum that essentially, right after the so-called coup, he had a referendum that essentially gave him almost dictatorial powers. It is only a matter of time until he's going to turn Turkey back into an Islamic Republic, and when that happens, it will fracture NATO.
Wow. And I'm not familiar with whether they are Shia or Sunni in Turkey.
They are
Would
Sunni.
they be aligned with Iran or Saudi Arabia?
No, they are Sunni.
So
Now
okay.
you may find some Shias, but they are Sunni.
But they would be more like what we see in Saudi.
Yep,
So
that's right.
Okay.
That's right. And when Mohammed Morsi was the president of Egypt and also the president of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, Recep Erdogan went to Egypt and they welcomed him, had a big thing for him, welcomed him with open arms as the leader of the new caliphate.
Uh-huh.
And that's exactly what he was looking for, you know. So that's his objective. That's his goal. I mean, that's what El-Sisi told us. And he, you know, he's made no bones about it.
Well, I want to offer your product. We're talking to Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin, and he's a part of this great documentary called Revelation: Dawn of Global Government. And he and many experts are talking for about an hour and 45 minutes of information, maps, imagery that will tell you what is really happening, how it's being fulfilled in the end days as a global government will emerge, and how behind the scenes it's been happening already for many decades, if not centuries. And this is fascinating material. We're honored to have him with us today. And sir, while you're with us, and I mean just because of your military experience, it doesn't stray far from this because you can relate it to this, but we've spoken about Islam and how the Marxists are going to try to use that for their agenda. How do you see current events with the North Korean missile crisis going forward? Do you think that's linked to China or to Iran or someone else or everybody?
Number one, we know unequivocally that the Chinese have been helping the North Koreans develop this missile program as well as the nuclear program. So we know that unequivocally, and I've seen photographs of to actually prove that this is the case. So China's been helping them.
Yes.
North Korea has been supported for several years now by Iran. We know that they test things for Iran. We know that when Iran does a test, there are always North Koreans there. We know that there's collusion, there's sharing of technology. So both Iran and China are connected here. One of the things that I think we need to understand is that the experts say that within a year at the outside, that North Korea will have everything they need to include the certainty to hit any place in the United States. I worry less about a missile falling on one of our major cities than I do about an electromagnetic pulse.
Uh-huh.
Keep in mind that they have two satellites up right now
that circle,
that are circling, they're orbiting the Earth. The optimal altitude for an electromagnetic pulse with a hydrogen warhead is about 500 kilometers above the Earth. So those satellites don't have to re-enter.
Okay.
They need to come down to about 350 to 500 kilometers above the Earth's surface, detonate that, and that sends us back 100 years or more. Read the book 1 second after.
Uh-huh.
That's my biggest fear.
Big concern. That would probably unleash an opportunity in America that a lot of Marxists have waited for. It'd be martial law, chaos, opportunity to seize the reins of power.
Yeah.
And who knows what all the executive orders say that I've never seen can be done to us in those conditions.
Well, remember too, and you kind of raised this issue earlier, Karl Marx talked about useful idiots. In other words, I'll partner with anybody that will help me achieve my objective, and then I'll get rid of them when I've been successful. That's what you're seeing is the Marxist and the Islamist, each thinking the other is the useful idiot, but they're working together.
Yeah.
And then you bring in the LGBT community, which is exploited by this Marxist movement.
In the name of human rights.
In the name of human rights, right.
Uh-huh. Wow. Well, there's so much to pull together, and just relating this to Revelation, we see in chapter 6, the rider goes forth on a white horse. We believe that's the Antichrist. He's got a bow and arrows, and he is going to conquer. And then that's followed by the red horse, which is the rider of war and disaster, and then the black horse, the famine and the economic depression. He's got a scale in his hands, economic scale. And then the fourth rider's that ghastly, gruesome death in Hades. And so these are bad days that are going to be coming.
But then in Revelation 19, there's a wonderful story of Jesus coming back on a white horse.
That's
with
the
a
best one.
blood-stained white robe leading a mighty army.
Amen.
And he's going to do battle. And he's going to be victorious.
Well, amen, amen. And I'm glad that's the last word.
Yep.
And not Lawrence O'Donnell. Amen.
Absolutely.
The real last word is Jesus. And maybe that's a good place to take you, our audience, and just remind you we've had the privilege of talking with Lieutenant General retired Jerry Boykin today. He's with the Family Research Council, now in Washington, D.C., talking about the documentary they produced, Revelation, Dawn of Global Government. We'd love for you to get that. Go to the website, prophecyofthenews.com, or the 800 number on your screen, and that's available to you there, and you can see how to get it for yourself. But really, that is the bottom line. If you live your life without Christ and you live long enough and this all comes to pass, it's going to be a very scary world for about 7 years. It's going to be a terrifying time that the Bible describes. Jesus said the days will be so awful, no flesh would have survived if God hadn't intervened. And of course, many will be deceived and lost, and they'll be eternally forever separated from God in a place called the lake of fire. But Christ came the first time to save us from that. And he wants to make a difference in your life. If you've never trusted him, realize that he is God. Jesus is God. And he died on the cross to pay for your sins. He was buried and rose again to give you everlasting life. And if you'll call on his name, surrender yourself into his hands, he will forgive you and save you and give you a glorious future. All these things we talk about that are so earth-shaking, realize that the Lord holds all things in his hands. He's the one that you want to be right with. So we want to urge you at Prophecy in the News to give your life to the Lord. And if you already know him, to live for him, to testify of him, and spend your days looking up, because he has promised to come again. Thank you for joining us today, and God bless you.